this computer. Hello and welcome to another virtual conversation at the Sharmin Bijan Mossavar-Rahmani Center for Iran and Persian Gulf Studies at Princeton University. I am Milad Odabaei. I'm a postdoctoral research associate at the center, and today I'm very excited to welcome and speak with Professor Anahita Ghazvinizadeh, who is an accomplished filmmaker, writer, and educator. We are very excited that Professor Ghazvinizadeh accepted to join our virtual conversation series, which is our way of continuing dialogues about and around Iran at a time where we cannot, unfortunately, meet in person. I'm just going to briefly introduce Professor Ghazvinizadeh and turn the screen to her for a presentation on a filmmaking career that crosses historical, cultural, linguistic worlds of Iran and the US. And after the presentation, we will have a brief conversation. And with her permission, I'm going to refer to her by her first name, Anahita, because we do know each other and I aspire to be her friend. So I'm just going to go with first name. So Anahita Ghazvinizadeh is an accomplished filmmaker, a writer, and an educator. She's currently an assistant professor at the Department of Cinematic Arts at the University of Iowa. Anahita is the director of short films such as When the Kid Was a Kid and Needle, which among other awards won the first Cine Foundation Award at the Cannes Film Festival and the Silver Hugo at the Chicago International Film Festival. Anahita's feature debut, They, premiered in 2017 official selection of the Cannes in France and has since appeared in several film festivals in Europe, in North America, and in Korea. For her work on They, she has received the George C. Lynn Filmmaker Award at the San Diego Film Festival and an IWC Filmmaker Award honorable mention from the Tribeca Film Institute. This award is reserved for works that, quote, clearly demonstrates that the filmmaker, Anahita here, has gone above and beyond just making a film. They have used exquisite attention to detail and unusual and signature techniques to manipulate the medium, thus creating an unforgettable sensory experience for the audience. Anahita began her career in Tehran, Iran, where she received her first degree in fine arts and studied filmmaking and screenwriting in the workshops of Abbas Kiarostami and Shadmehr Rastin. She edited, directed, and co-directed her first films prior to moving to Chicago in 2011, I believe. Since then, she has continued her studies and creative projects and received a graduate degree in fine arts with a focus on film, video, new media, and animation from the School of the Arts Institute of Chicago. Her teaching and mentorship resume, as well as the list of her writings, awards, and lectures, are expansive. She's particularly focused on the training of young and junior filmmakers and on teaching screenwriting and production. It is difficult, particularly for me, to put into words Anahita's work that has been described in terms of fearless artistry, stunning beauty, and supreme craftsmanship. Again, I'm borrowing from the Tribeca Film Institute's recognition of her work. But let me end by noting that among some of the central themes of Anahita's films are those of personhood of children, gender and sexuality, play, growth, becoming, and coming of age and into gendered and sexual identities. In films such as When the Kid Was a Kid, Needle, and They, adults are often not present. They're physically or metaphorically elsewhere. In When the Kid Was a Kid, located in Iran, the mother only calls to leave a message that tonight, too, she will be late. The absence of adults, however, casts a heavy shadow on what we see as childhood, or what we might describe as becoming adult, becoming sexual, becoming gendered, becoming accountable to various identities that we explore, acquire, but we are also alienated from and irreducible to. And when the kid was a kid, the absence of the figures of authority, such as parents, make possible playing games that have explicit and implicit gendered and sexual registers. The children cross-dress and enact a dinner and dance party typical of Iranian gatherings. They speak, dance, flirt, and express themselves as adults. And through this game, they also inhabit and explore the freedom of becoming, of doing without exactly knowing one what does, and hence not being accountable to predetermined identities. The distinction between playing adults and violently being thrown into a world of fending for oneself, literally feeding oneself, fashioning oneself, and worrying about one's parent is often indistinguishable in Anahita's film. And at least for me, this playful refusal of categorical distinction is central to the aesthetic work that her work performs. We at the Iran Center are extremely excited to host this presentation of Anahita's work. The title of her presentation today is Filmmaking in a Foreign Land. But let me end by saying her work is defiantly non-relativistic, exploring difference of gender and sexuality, language and culture, with an aesthetic eye on the universal drives and predicaments that animate both the experience of subjectivity and the work of art, even in our age of mechanical reproduction. So without further taking time, I will hand the screen to Anahita, and I will just note that links to her short films that I mentioned, When the Kid Was a Kid and Needle, will be posted on the center's website where you accessed this video. Okay.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Milad. That would be your introduction is way more articulate than what I'm going to say. I'm probably going to speak in more simple language, but thank you so much for inviting me. It means a lot to me, and for this, generous and deep look into the work I have done, which are, in my opinion, like really small works. I'm saying not with humility, really, like I've done some small projects here and there, and I hope to do more and to do better, but I'm very happy to share what I have so far with you. And I have some slides to go through and to talk about what has been my path or my journey from Iran to here, what happened on the way, what changed in me. But I think things you brought up made me think, like in the beginning, I was simply in love with cinema, with storytelling and cinema. And there's a lot about childhood, about, I would say now very openly, innocence of childhood, about like that direct raw experience of being in the world, of the inner world of a child that is so sensitive and so receptive of a lot of things, yet also has that quiet mysterious presence. Like those were always so fascinating for me, especially for children who are about to become adults or to grow up into like adulthood or becoming young adults soon, and in that liminal phase, what do they go through when they're still rooted in their childhood, yet they're starting to see the world differently, the pain of that in between space, yet also like the quiet depth and mystery of that space have been in my films. And it's interesting, my work grew, especially after coming to the US, to be more and more related to, like, for example, what is children's ideas or experiences of gender and gender identity. But now that I look at it, like I was just trying to be more directly connected to experience of childhood. Even in Iran, I wasn't really much oriented around any theory about gender. It was more like through my studies in the US in my master's that I was more directed towards that way. But I think especially recently I've had another shift that I'm again like far from like theoretical frameworks, especially around gender for my work. And I also see there's a lot of problematic things in sexualizing childhood in, extreme ways that are being done in our society now. So anyway, I'm just bringing that up. That is a complex issue, and we can get into it more deeply. But for me, more than anything, is to be truthful to the potential that is in cinema for showing interiority. That is like the most fascinating thing for me, and the interiority of a person who is in that like space of like growth between childhood and adulthood. That is like such a rich moment. And I think in my films, in the scenes or the parts that have been more successful, I've tried to bring that out, in a way that you're so close to, as you said, the subjectivity or the point of view, point of feeling of that character, without using the most expected devices in the cinema of like hearing a voiceover or seeing the point of view. Like you're close to the point of the sensory point of view of that character, feeling what they're feeling, like kind of what they're touching, what they're hearing their breaths like louder than the other. So all these details about how you can get close to an interior sense of a character. So I just wanted to say that in relation to what you say and in relation to what I will talk about my films. I think that is says somehow like what I've been trying to do with these films. But as you said, Milad, I'm the name that I thought for this talk would be Filmmaking in a Foreign Land, which is also the name of, or kind of the title of, a course I'm currently teaching at the university with grad students. And we talk about different like examples of diasporic cinema, of like we've been reading some stuff about accented cinema when they're filmmakers from different parts of the world who are dislocated, who do not belong to the place where they are at, and they start making so-called accented films. And what does that mean when you bring your stories from another country to a new country? And out of necessity or out of choice, you start becoming a cultural producer in this new place. And what is that accent, not only in your speech, but also in your artwork that you bring with yourself? So I think if I talk a little about, like briefly about what was my past and then my ongoing past and present in the US, it can help with that. So I may start sharing the,
Thank you.
yeah, definitely the slide that I have here. Okay, great. I go full screen. So share. Okay, is it working now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Can you see the bars and stuff around, or it's good?
I can, but it's okay.
Okay, good. Yeah. So Filmmaking in a Foreign Land, and this is just a frame from my feature film Day. So first I want to start that like my background in Iran was, before anything, a love for theater and for drama and for acting. So when I was at the school, this may be the story of a lot of kids at the school who love arts and theater, that like I was always involved in the theater teams at the school from like elementary school to high school, and have been in different places from Seymour, which is not Seymour, sorry, Mantaroteira Attar, which is a story about Seymour, 30 birds that they're going to find this mythical bird, and they realized Seymour, which means 30 birds, is their own body together, that like they together collectively make the bird they were looking for. So I'm just bringing that up to say there was a lot of good literature I was reading for these plays we worked on in Iran. And even though there are a lot of questions I have about the educational system that was super stressful and strict and difficult in Iran, but there were some good points about it too, that especially in terms of literary work, like Iranian literature, we could read really good like classic or old poetry from elementary school, and a lot of them were turned into plays, and I was always involved in them and would get the first role in all of the plays, and that was my joy. And I kind of like, maybe there was some difficulties in the household I was living in, so it was always a joy to take a break and not be at home and stay longer at school in order to get the work done for my theater practice or whatever. So I was always involved. And later on, we went on in middle school and high school to become more existentialist. And like some of our parents were into French existentialism. So in my house, I found some plays by Albert Camus and by Jean-Paul Sartre, and I didn't know what they mean. Probably they did something permanent with my psyche for the rest of my life, because I read them at such a young age without like feeling or knowing what is the meaning of a lot of negativity in a lot of them. But anyway, I would bring them to school and we're like, oh, so exciting, let's play like Camus' Suat Tafahum, misunderstanding. I don't know what is the English translation. It was all translations in Farsi. and like let's just like translate or adapt all of these into school plays, which is funny. High school students playing like Albert Camus at the school is kind of like hilarious, but that was the joy. And then towards the end of the high school, I started writing reviews on acting in films. And just out of the blue, I sent one of them to Majalah Film, which is this film monthly magazine in Iran. That was like the oldest cinema magazine, or the longest running film magazine we have in Iran. And I was 16 or 17. And Hushange Golmakani is his name, who's the chief editor, called me and said, "Oh, that's good. We're going to publish it." So I was so excited that, oh, I'm going to be published. I'm going to become a film critic. And I'm so excited about it. So I put these photos here because at the time I was really fascinated by, like, my first review was about the acting of Reza Kianian, who's an Iranian actor in an Iranian film. And at the time I was reading his book, which was called The Magic of Acting, Shobade Bazigari, and saying that acting is not life, acting is performance. And then he would make a lot of references to Brecht, and before Brecht to Denis Diderot, that the books about like performance or performativity, like the role play that is in acting, that is like an idea separate from, or kind of like a little different from method acting and trying to be so real. And so, as we say, zirpusti in Farsi, we used to say like that you have the character under your skin and you really transform into this other creature. This was more about the joy of acting is to be like there are traces of that performance in the way you're performing. This is all a game, and we all know this is a game, and so how is the play self-reflexive of that? That Brecht has his own, theories about that, about like the theories of like the distancing, or, there are a lot of things that I was reading about different modes of acting and performance at the time that I was fascinated by. And that was my way into thinking about drama and filmmaking. And I mainly decided that I want to write about acting at the time. I wasn't sure if I'm going to be a filmmaker or not. And I went to the university. I mean, I was actually thinking I may become a playwright, I may become a screenwriter. I wasn't sure yet, but I loved writing, I knew. And I took concours, which is this test to get into universities in Iran, and I got the first rank in the country. So that was a huge thing. I won a car and some gold
Wow.
coins, and yeah, and the car later was in a car accident. So anyway, in a film production that we had. So after that, I decided that, okay, like I can choose to study whatever I want. There are no limitations. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start studying film. I was ambivalent between film and theater. And first semester, when I studied film, I decided, okay, I'm going to remain in the cinema major and continue with filmmaking, with the purpose of becoming more of a critic, probably, or film theorist. That was like the first idea. And I started working on this film magazine that came out only for student magazine for one issue. That was called DAST, which means hand, but it was also an acronym for Danishkade Sinema Teatr, the University of Cinema and Theater. And like we wrote about Hamlet and all the cinematic adaptations of Hamlet. So I was trying to bring all my love for theater and plays into that film magazine, but it didn't last long. And my undergrad was first focused on writing about cinema, and I love my film history and film theory courses, but little by little, I made friends with people who were more involved in the making of the film. So I started writing screenplays, helping other students with directing their films. And then through one of my closest people who I worked with, Mortaza Farshbaf, and another friend, Sowole Rezvani, those were friends I had at that time closest to me. And Mortaza introduced me to Abbas Kiarostami's workshop. So we kept making films through workshop. That was not exactly like university. It was like a workshop, like an old school workshop with someone who's the master of the craft. And it wasn't reading, or it wasn't any theoretical framing of what we were doing. It was more, you go out, you bring it to the class, we talk about it, you make it better, and then we show it next time. And that pushed me into actual making of the work, which was really necessary, because in the university, I felt there was more focus on reading and on the theoretical side of it, and there was less space or motivation for filmmaking. And the workshop helped me with the making side. But at the same time, I always loved my reading and research at the university. And one thing that became really kind of informative in what I did as a filmmaker was my love for قانون پرورش فکری کودک و نوجوان, which is the Institute for the Intellectual Development of Children and Youth. And at the time, I did some more research about Kanun. These are some frames of the films that were made with the support of this institution from around the time of revolution. So a lot of the films in 1970s, I think Kanun becomes very active. Like Kiarostami, who was my teacher, was one of the main artist who was supported by Kanun to make films for children and about children. A lot of them were just simple educational films. Like Kiarostami made beautiful ones, like how to brush your teeth, or what are the colors, or if your friend like breaks your pen, what would you do in response? Would you break his pen or her pen, or would you be kind? Like those things that are very simple. And I think actually they were really interestingly, directed Kiarostami towards a childlike simplicity in his cinema that, like, you can see in these early films he made for Kanun, but he continued to, keep that kind of simple approach to telling stories, which I love in his cinema. But anyway, I was studying all these Kanun films. I was fascinated by it. Also, after the revolution, I think Kanun keeps being very active and successful. And what I was trying to, like, at the time, writing about it and researching about it was how Kanun became like really important after the revolution for art house or independent cinema, but also for all the restrictions, especially political restrictions in terms of what can you tell in your stories? What do you need to, not tell directly? Like, can you be directly critical of what is going on? And if not, the children's stories can be always great allegories, what is going on. For example, a lot of children's stories happen at school where there are authorities and a child has, done something wrong. And then there are some kids who are rebellious against this authority. So I could find these like allegorical images of society in some of these Kanun films that were made at the time. And some of them are very brilliant, like Homework by Kiarostami, or قضیه شکل اول شکل دوم, First Case, Second Case by Kiarostami. They're all really simple dilemmas happening in a classroom, especially First Case, Second Case. But for example, the questions become really, politically important about if a child is making noise at the class, are you going to tell the teacher who that kid is and be able to get back to the classroom? Are you going to be loyal to your friend? And that question being asked, like there were a lot of people who were like political figures at the time, and they were asked these questions and their answers had a lot of meaning to it, while it was like a simple childish problem. Or even for Homework, which is about children being interviewed about like the system of punishment and encouragement at the school and the terror they're living in at this time, which is, I think, it's during the wartime that it is made, or around the end of the war. So it's just like this society full of crisis and anxiety, and these kids are growing up in it, and the conversations with them. I would say Kiarostami's film are more kind of out of the box, like very creative examples, but they're also like awesome films being made supported by Kanun, in which you see a lot of what is going on in the society in them. There are other examples like The Key by Ebrahim Furuzish was one of my favorite ones. If I'm not mistaken, the screenplay is written by Kiarostami. If I'm not wrong, I should check it. I may be wrong. I think he wrote the screenplays, or at least the ideas for The Key and The White Balloon by Jafar Panahi. But in a film like The Key, there is this idea of a child being like a miniature adult. That's where it came to my mind by just trying to analyze this film for myself, that we see, I think, an image of a society in war where the father is gone, so the father figure is absent and the mother is going at work. Economically, there's this crisis going on, there are a lot of mothers working, so the kids become like little adults who are left on their own, and there's this brother who's taking care of the little one without knowing anything how to protect his little sibling, but he's trying to get it done. And this idea of like having this kid becoming like a little man who's trying to, take care of life with the absence of the parents was really interesting for me in these films. Even like in a film like Bashu, like the child that is left on his own and is trying to find his place in the world. That was in a lot of Kanun films. Even in Bread and Ali, one of Kiarostami's first films, there's not this whole social context, but we still are seeing a moment when a kid in the street who has gone to buy bread is like faced by this dog and has to like go through the alley while he's so scared of this dog, and he has to like break his own fears and try to move forward on his own. So a lot of Kanun films that you see the examples here are about children growing up through trauma, through difficult experiences, navigating their own way through the world. And that was for me fascinating. In Kanun, I think there was all these important symbolic or allegorical aspects in the stories, but also there was this influence of, for example, Italian New Realism. So there are all these characters who are or there are all these actors in the films who are like rarely they are professional child actors. They're mainly non-actors. Even a lot of adult performers in the films are non-actors, so it has this real life texture, while I think it also has like compositionally it is showing a lot of things that is going on in the society. So anyway, I brought all of this up to say that the rich history of films made about and for children in Iran for me was probably the biggest background behind what I made later. And the fact that I spent time with it and tried to research it and thought about it and wrote about it was really informative in what I later made. When I was in Iran, okay, so these are the two major projects that I worked on in Iran. So Morning or Sug is the film on the left that you see.
I have not seen the slides change.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the slides changing, so I wasn't sure. Yeah.
At all?
No, I don't see it. No, it's still on the.
Oh, so how about now?
No.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh,
Let's.
now it changed.
I see. Okay, because it was full screen. Now you can see changing, right?
Yes. So we might, yes.
Can I can go quickly through the slides that we're missing so far.
So yes, you spoke about these. Yes.
Yeah, so I spoke about Reza Kianian and the magic of acting, and these are examples of books, like just covers of the books by Brecht and Diderot, the acting reference as I talked about. And these are just all frames from Kanun films. Like you see here is Bashu, Homework by Kiarostami, The Break Time, and The Traveler. These are all Kiarostami films. And here are also The Key by Ibrahim Fruzes is on the top left. And then there are other films like The Runner by Amir Naderi, Life and Nothing More by Kiarostami. And these are, you see these new ones too, right? The Runner, Homework, The Key, Black and White, Where's the Friend's House. So we didn't miss too much. So now I'm sure that you're seeing all of them.
Yep.
Okay, very good. So after that, I went on to collaborate on some, after doing some like simpler, smaller projects in the first years of the workshop and university, I participated in some, like more major projects. One of them was Morning or Sug, which was a feature film directed by my friend Mortaza Farshbaf, and we co-wrote it together. This was very much, I think, inspired by Kiarostami. It was a road movie with this couple who are deaf or hard of hearing, and they use sign language, and they're going on this trip with this hearing and speaking child, and they have to give him some news about what has happened, and like they're trying to find their way of communication. And that was a really interesting and really difficult but super rewarding experience to write a script, to work with these actors who speak with sign language. And I was the connector between them and the script, and try to translate everything into the sign language with them and learn it from them, and also work with the child actor. So I was mainly working with non-actors. and with a child actor for that one, for Suk. And then also I finished my short film, When the Kid Was a Kid Before I Leave Iran, which is a film that, as you said, the link of it is there and people can go and watch it if they want. So When the Kid Was a Kid was very much inspired by all the things I talked about Kanun films. So the idea came from khalabazi, or like playing child's play, of like role playing the adults. And I did that passionately as a kid. I loved to wear like big skirts and become someone's mom, and like all of these. And then the idea came to me to make this game in which there are all the kids who get together in an apartment and play roles. And one of these kids is living with a single mother, so he has to go to this game for the first time dressing as his mom and appear in this game. So the premise of the whole story was very simple. And then I tried to make that game through a lot of rehearsals with these children. Like they actually helped me to rewrite the script and to create the whole film together. I can show you a short clip of the film if that sounds good, like a 5-minute clip.
Yes, let's do that. Sorry, I was on mute.
No, definitely. So I have this open.
Let me also say that this film also takes me to khalabazi. I had an older sister, and
Right.
I was always included in her games with, and that was my world. So we did this all the time.
Yeah, I did that a lot too, and yeah, it was the most joyful thing to do. Okay.
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 Voglio dire, Mara, sei semplicemente meraviglioso, è un uomo così dolce, così straordinario.
سلام حمید. آره من منتظرتم. بچه دارم میام. سلام. خوبی؟ چی درست می‌کنی؟ سلام بفرمایید. خوبی؟ میگم شما شیمی داشتی چرا شیمی می‌رید؟ پس یا معرفی شما چرا برنزه شدی؟ من آخه ترکیه بودم. خوش گذشت؟ شهر جون بیا. آقای عارفی دوست اونجا گرم بود شما قبل بکشیدی؟ نه قبل بکشیدم. شهر جونم مامان طاهر میشناسین که بفهمین بشین. البته من که این سال توی ساختمونم ما نمیبینمشون چون بیشتر خونه نیستم. شهر جون ماتوتون رو بدین من دستم بگیرم. بفهمین بشین. البته چون مامانشون اجازه ما ببخشید البته مهمونی ما ساده است دیگه. خب ممکنه خوشتون نره میبینید که مهمونی ما خانوادگیه. مهران جون طلوع رو به خودش میگم چرا واقعا شبیه طلوعه؟ چرا؟ چون که بدون اینا شبیه بچه‌م. میبینید که آزادشون از همین بودن. شما چرا تاها رو نبردید؟ چون تا شبا زود میخوابه من پیشش میمونم. پیشش میمونین؟ من که دیدم شما شبا نصف شب میاد. من اصلا پشت من دلم پر هستم بپاشم برم دستشویی. من شب
Okay. All right. So, yeah, that was a clip from the beginning of when the kid was a kid. I can start sharing again my slides. Can you see it now?
Yes, and it moves.
Right, yeah. Just like I thought I would share with you a few things about when the kid was a kid. First of all, I shot it I think around 2010 or so, and then I left Iran in 2011, which I will tell you in a minute what was its story. But it was edited and completed right before I go in order especially to add it to my portfolio to apply for grad schools. And it was only after I left that the film was really well received in Iran, like it won awards in Jashn Khane Cinema, or all these festivals and stuff in Iran. And actually, it was really well received in Iran, not around the world much. It was later, after I made my next short films, that people started watching this and actually liking it more than any other work I have made. So it took a few years, strangely, for people to pay attention to it and like it, actually. And later, when it was more seen, I actually found it to be more relatable and interesting for people, not only Iranians, but people here, my friends, or anywhere as well. The process of it was hard, but perhaps one of the most adventurous and joyful processes I've been through for making a film, which was finding all of these kids through my relatives, my friends. Like Taha, the main actor, was the brother of one of my classmates at the university. The other kids I found through like asking my aunt, like, are there any kids in your building who would want to like play these roles? And then getting together, playing these games as rehearsals, and the kids actually brought so much of their own improvisations into the story. So much of it was kind of rewritten through rehearsing with them. And I had some specific images and shots in mind to have for the first and last part of the film, which is Taha preparing to go to the game, and then at the end he coming back home alone. Like those were more like shot by shot made in my mind, but the part that is their games, we try to go with their energy and with whatever, because even though we rehearsed it so much and we kind of fixed and confirmed what is going to be said in the film, there were kids and they were so into it, and like they would make up some new things each take, and we were like with the cinematographer Hamid Ahmadi, we were trying to like follow them and get as much material as we can. I had at the time like an idea which ended up like it was proved at the end to be a very stupid idea, to have the whole part with the children's game to be a long take, because at the time I was like, oh, long takes are very cool and I want to have a real-time long take scene of the kids play that like there's no cut and we go from this space to the other with them. And you know, it could be good, but it didn't work with the facilities and the space we had. And we decided actually it's much better to treat it more with like handheld documentary like camera, that we're just filming them, getting their reactions, and just being with them and getting as many shots as we can. At the time I was watching some films by the American independent filmmaker John Cassavetes, and I think his work was very inspiring for me in terms of like the camera use, handheld camera, close-ups, like following a small crowd, you know, in their real energy as much as you can with different shots. And so When the Kid was a Kid was the film I made, and obviously because of the subject matter and the story of the film, when I later came to the US for my grad studies, that was a lot related to like performativity, gender identity. But as I said, when I was making it, it was really an observation of khalebazi, and it was really an experience of it, and trying to get close to this one person who has this special different experience of getting into this game. And you know, like trying to directly look at it through like what the children themselves brought to the film. And then after that I went to the school. Milad, did you want to say something?
I mean, I just not too much because I don't want to take away. This is wonderful, but I really appreciate to kind of note the gap between various sort of theoretical concerns, especially concerns and theories developed here in the last 20, 30 years, and actually what you are trying to do, which is very much located in Iran, not necessarily engaged or responsible to or haunted by theories of gender and sexuality or questions of gender and sexuality. But I would also want to suggest that the value of those theories is precisely you are capturing something of you are doing some of the work that the film is doing some of the work that those theories try to do. So as opposed to saying that you were not engaged with these theories, I want to say like these theories are what are trying to get to the kinds of experiences that the films try to capture. But I just want to mention like how much I fully, this experience, the Iran that you described before, after revolution, during the war, is so much captured in this movie. The fact that I also grew up in the 80s in an apartment building, and playing under this staircase was a thing that we did. And also, if there was a bombardment of Tehran, you would go under the staircase, because that's the place that is, you go to take shelter. That's where it's safe in case of a bombing, and that's where the kids are playing. This is so striking and so much located in that history for me. I understand that it's obviously communicates way beyond that history.
Exactly. No, absolutely. I was born in 1989, so I know it more through my sister's experience. She lived all like throughout 80s when she was little. But then even for me, like mainly remembering 90s, it was like the same thing, of playing in the basement, under the stairs, in the backyard. And yeah, definitely. And even at the time I was making the film, this was really like how it was for those kids. They didn't play as much khalebazi as I did as a kid, and they were a little annoyed by me asking them to do it, like, because this was the beginning of like having those digital, it wasn't yet iPhone and iPad in Iran, at least. Like I don't remember if in 2011 we had iPhone, 2009, 10 we had them. So definitely the kids didn't. but it was more like they had these digital games, or they were into in general games. Like I remember one of the boys was so into like some wrestling games, video games. And that was really funny, that like how they were talking about the games while we were rehearsing. That was really funny too. So
How would you translate khale bazi? Like, um,
so khale means aunt, right? And bazi means playing. So playing aunt, I don't know, that is a literal translation. But I don't know is there in English some game of like role play that the kids play the role of the adults, or you don't think there is?
yeah, I also don't know.
I
But you
don't know.
were telling us that it was people who were born in the 90s or after don't play this game as much as an earlier generation.
Right, I'm not sure. I think at least in that group, like the boys weren't really into it. So it was like some work to get them. But at the end, they got really interested because I gave them a lot of freedom to play or like to create and build the characters, and to like imagine, oh, this could be the parent I can play. And especially in the scenes that they would gather to have dinner, or like it was kind of a competition who would be funnier. So they started like making a lot of jokes. It was a lot like actually our parents' parties, where there's like loud laughter and everyone is trying to be funnier than the other and saying loud jokes. And they did a really good job recreating that. So yeah, then I came to the US, and it's interesting a lot about like there's something my teacher Kiarostami taught me that I value a lot now more than before, which is about just how much you have to be immersed in life more than anything as a filmmaker. And at the time when I came to the US especially, I was so much more into reading. I still am. I love reading. I love especially literature, good literature. But then also like to not lose your direct contact with life courageously. And because a lot of the theory that we say does not have like the unpredictability, the complexity of life in it, a lot of times like we want to put things very clearly into some analysis of what life should be. And for me at least, I have a process of now unloading some of the programs that have been put in my mind, because I think I became too much, ideological at some point of like having ideas, and rather than looking at life and seeing this is what it is, this is reality, and then think what reality is, I was more seeing through a certain lens, as if like there's a pre-programmed idea about how things should be in my mind, and like life should be contained by that. So this may sound a little abstract, but I think for me, little by little, I'm learning more and more to free myself of anything that is trying to come before life and contain it in some frame that, now I know we're looking at like identity in children. No, I just want to like be more daring and look at life for what it is, and try to more than anything have like direct contact with life. Yeah, so if that makes sense, I think.
Anyone who has gone through the experience of graduate school knows exactly what you're talking about. Not at all abstract.
No, and that's like what I'm trying to do. And yeah, so anyway, when I was in grad school, I was trying to navigate through many things, from not knowing English well, from not being able to go back to Iran financially. And also I had a single entry visa. My parents were so worried I would go back, not be able to return. Also, it would be very expensive to go back and forth. And also in general, that's how it goes in our family, that like we're very close, but we don't see each other as much maybe. So I came here and we're close like in our heart, and we talk to each other on the phone and stuff, but we don't spend a lot of time together. So that's another story. But I decided I'm going to stay. And one of the most important encouragements came from Kiarostami. I'm bringing him up because he was really influential in what I decided to do. At the time, I think he had finished the making of Certified Copy, which was his feature film made in Italy. And if I'm not mistaken, he was working on or going to finish soon his Japanese production, Like Someone in Love. And he talked to me about what I'm going to do. And before I go, he told me, you know what, you can make a film in a language you don't know. And he was sharing his experience of like Certified Copy or later of Like Someone in Love, and that there were scenes that he didn't know what they're saying. And he wasn't sure what part of script is it that they're saying. Is it the right take? Are they saying all the right dialogues? But he could get a feel of the scene by the by the way they're performing it without knowing exactly what the words are. And also, like, there was this process of translating the story that he had in mind before from Iran and taking it to another culture. And like, he liked to take some risk with that, you know, and go and make his story in another culture and kind of translate. It's like a translation of an idea he already had. And he encouraged me that you won't lose much, just try that, because everyone were telling me you're crazy, like you're already having good connections with independent cinema in Iran, like you're in the Kiarostami circle. I knew other filmmakers like Jafar Panahi, like many really good filmmakers in the independent film scene in Iran. And as you know, we have a very strong cinema internationally, like since at least I think 70s or 80s, let's say, like at least from 90s, we have like very constant presence in Cannes Film Festival. Before that too, you know, like Kanun Cinema was really major. So like everyone were telling me that like you should stay and just work here, or just go and study for 2 years and return, you know, you cannot stay there. And I went to a school of the Art Institute of Chicago, where there were some filmmakers who graduated from there some years before me, like Epichatpong Verasetakul, who's a filmmaker from Thailand, that he made a film named Uncle Bunmi Who Can Recall His Past Lives. That's one of his films. He was a very good filmmaker who, like, more than 10 years before me studied there, but he would go back to Thailand to make films and to return. And everyone would like recommend to me that you cannot start just making film here. I mean, I tell you like what were the suggestions that were put like in front of me, but a lot of people thought it would be much better if I returned to make my films and come back, and I didn't want to do that. And while I decided I'm going to make something here in the US, a lot of suggestions, this was a very progressive film program that, like, I felt being a narrative filmmaker was offensive to most of people. Like, what? You make like linear narrative stories? Why don't you make like multi-channel installations? Why don't you, like, the suggestion of turn it into an installation was given to me many times. I had many good professors who knew where I come from, and they would tell me just be comfortable with making a narrative film if that's what you need to do. But a lot of them were just trying to push me into making it into an installation, not making a narrative films. What are the problematics with the narrative form itself? And I felt a little guilty, but at the end I did what I needed to do, which I made this story, like this little story that I had in mind, into a short film there. And the other thing was, there was a lot of push about if I want to make a story or a narrative film or just a piece, it has to be something about the Iranian woman experience. So like there was the push that that part is what, you know, what is interesting. Like, for example, if I was in the performance department, to make a performance that is, you know, has that Iranian, like Middle Eastern woman immigration, have all of that in it. And I wanted to resist that, because I didn't want to make a film about that just for the sake of not doing what is expected to do in the first place, but also because I didn't feel there's a necessity to make a film that is so much about my subjective experience. I had a story that had so much of my personal experience in it, but within the fictional form. And then also I find myself to be a storyteller, and I wanted to continue doing that. And that story was with me and haunting me from Iran. So I thought, I'm going to just keep and do it. And so the story was about this girl who's going to get her ears pierced. And it's the day of her ear piercing, and she's living in this very dysfunctional family. And I remember I wrote the screenplay. It was in bad English, like probably mainly correct English. But even now, when I write dialogues, I need to work with English speaking, like first language English speaking people to help me edit my dialogue, because a lot of things are kind of like awkward for a native speaker to use the kind of sentence I write. So I remember I just wrote it, and then I contacted a few friends I knew at school to help me connect with performers who would play the roles, like the child of one of the students played the young person's role, or like a performance student we had played the mother's role. So it was like finding any resources I could in my close circle at the school, and try to rewrite the script with the performers, and then make it, and try to translate everything from Iranian version to American version as simply as I can. That, okay, this was going to be shot in a drugstore or a pharmacy, but in the US they don't do that in the pharmacies. It has to be in this like first clinic that the father is trying to do it, and then later to an accessory store. So just the logistics of how to make the story here. And the other part of it is that there was a huge retrospective for Robert Bresson, the French filmmaker at the time. And so I thought that, okay, we can, I thought that I'm sorry, I was really inspired by his style of filmmaking. I won't go into details, and I know I'm taking too much time. I was just looking at the time now. I can talk a lot, but it was more like Bresson has this style of fragmentation, that instead of seeing a long shot of the space and then going into the details, what if you show more details, and then let the viewer to make the connection of these details in their own mind. And what would that mean then? Like, instead of having a clear, holistic image of what the whole thing is, you have a more fragmented idea, but you make it more whole in your mind. And a lot of scenes, like, I would try to be very close to this character by showing details of the ears, of the hands, of just getting that sensory intimacy in the work. But not being like into showing first the whole picture and then going to the details. So that was one of the directing things I had in mind. And other than that was like really flat, direct, static shots that I try to use in most of the scenes. I can show a very short clip, maybe like a 2-minute clip of Needle.
That sounds great.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
I love that. This will also be linked on the website.
Yes, so you can see the whole film. And I'm not going to show the whole thing because it will be too long, but just the part of it. So can you see the video page now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
You okay? You're not nervous, right?
All right, let's go ahead and mark your ears. Let me see. Perfect. What do you think, Mom?
It looks fine. It's not working. What's not working? The anesthetic. So, oh no, you don't need them with the guns, honey. You won't feel anything.
You don't need any anesthetic. By the time you're done, you won't even notice anything happened.
All right, Lily, you have any friends at school? Good. You have a lot of friends? Good. Who's your best friend? Gabriella, huh?
I didn't know you do that.
No, I've been trying to call you.
Let's wait for her.
She's not even using a needle for the procedure, right? She's not wearing gloves. I mean, he's wearing a needle. You can do it now.
What? You sure? You want to do it now? You don't want to wait for your mom?
Yeah, her phone call will take a long time. I'm ready.
Yeah, I think that would be enough. I want to also like leave some suspension and make people go and watch the film if they haven't. But yeah, so Needle was made in Chicago, and like what I was expecting was a huge failure. And that's what Kiarostami told me: prepare yourself for a film that no one will see, and just do what you can do in order to finish a full short film there and see how it works. But of course, it was the opposite. It was like so successful festival wise. It showed in Cannes Film Festival. We won an award there, and it went on showing in different festivals. And it was, I talked about accented films or something. We were talking with my students about what could be an accent in a film. That I won't go into much like, theoretical talks about it, but it was more like a strange film for people who are used to like independent American film, because on the one hand, it is made in English, happening in the US. It looks a lot like middle-class American family, but at the same time, like it had some strange tone to it, and the film was made by someone, meaning me, who had only experience of living in the US for a few months, less than a year, and just started like, to decided to make this story happening there. But I think I was very inspired by films like Certified Copy, that there is some universal aspect to this story, that it can take it anywhere and it can be made. And also it became like my first experience of like how to make a film in a language that is your second language, in a place that you don't know well. Yeah, and so that was my project for my grad study, like my thesis project. And then after that, because the project was kind of successful, I stayed in the US. I went to an art residency later in Houston, Texas. And then I kept making short films. Like one of them is called In the Trees, which was inspired by the Baron in the Trees, but I didn't show it anywhere. It was like a longer short film, and I don't know, there are some issues with it, that we couldn't show it much, but it was a great experience to just keep making short films and videos. And like these are some of the stills from it, again working with children and with young performers. And then after that, okay, I have these slides because there was another, I'm talking about the short films I worked on. Another project that I worked on was actually a short film called What Remains. And the whole idea of this short film comes from this company in Sweden, Momento Film, in collaboration with Change Attitude, which was this institution that they wanted to make films like raising awareness against exploitation of children. And like seeing my works, they wanted to involve me in this project. So I actually made my first film that didn't have a child in it. There was a young performer in it, but was not the main character. And it was actually about the memory of trauma, the memory of abuse in childhood, which was a story that I had in mind and I always wanted to tell. And I had the Alice Munro slides here. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Because she has a lot of stories, short stories that I was reading at the time, and I was really fascinated by the Canadian short story writer that deal with memory, and like you're so close to the subjectivity of this character who's carrying this really heavy weight of a trauma or a memory, but you don't know what it is. And there's this uneasy feeling that you carry in the story. And she writes with such subtlety. And at the end, like you realize what has been in the past that has been hidden all the time under everything you've been reading. So some of her stories had that to me. That's why I put it here. And another one was, like I told you, I love plays and drama. And Henrik Ibsen was one of the first writers I started reading. And A Doll's House, a lot of his plays, but like especially at that time, I was fascinated by A Doll's House because of like how, like at the end, there is a very confrontational monologue by Nora, the character, that like opens very directly what has been her issue from the beginning of the play. And so I wanted to like practice some kind of dialogue writing inspired by Ibsen in this film, which I tried to do of this character who's in my short film facing a person who's been abusive in the past, and how would you find a very direct language at the end to as the name of the whole project suggests, to break the silence. So each of us were trying to, 5 filmmakers have different iterations or interpretations of what breaking the silence around exploitation of children means. So yeah, these were the short projects I worked on. And I think these were for me the transition into feeling a little more like confident into I'm able to make a film here. Like with Needle was more, like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to make it happen. And then after that, I kept making works. And with What Remains actually was the first film that I brought Farsi language, our language Farsi or Persian, into the film. And I felt more comfortable that now it's not anymore the expectation from grad school, but now like freely I can actually bring in more of my background into the films I make. Also, I have more years of being away from home, and I have more an idea of what experience of immigration and being dislocated means. So I brought more of that also in my feature film They, and I think in the future I would like to even have that more in my films, but in a, I would say like more organic way, like in a way that I feel more confident about showing that mixture of Iranian background with now getting used to being here. I must say I grew up like more than anywhere in the US, even though, I mean, it's really hard to say that because of course the childhood years are most formative. So it's not accurate to say I grew up more than anywhere here. I actually got a lot from my Iranian life for 20, 21 years I was there. But I made more conscious choices of growth, of, like of making my life here all on my own, of, choosing the paths that were not easy to choose them and finding my way. So like the thing I think we were, I don't know if it was in the beginning we were saying, but anyway, I just want to say that like I have a feeling of being at home here now, even though it's not like Iran for me, but I have a feeling that I've made my path here, and I've changed so much in the US, more than I think I changed in my adult life in Iran. And I also should say I appreciated the freedom of being able to talk about things that I would not be able to talk about them in Iran here. And that is very clear for me. So I think there is the freedom and the also like agency I had to take in any way to make my way and to, make my life here. That makes me think I'm more in control here, now than I would be in Iran. But at the same time, I know there's so much that I'm losing by not making films in my own culture, in my own country, to not have that support and that sense of belonging. So it's a loss, but there's also so much I have gained here that I appreciate so much. That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this is also kind of a predicament that we all, you and I both who were born and grew up in Iran and then coming here, studying here, but the defamiliarization that being here allows, inhabiting an entirely different language and then trying to think and return and think about and talk about is a very unique experience that marks us forever.
Absolutely, yeah.
I even you're still kind of thinking about they're here in this way that's also quite unique to, let's say, not recent immigration and all of this. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Those were the slides I have. I thought, I'm also very sorry. I think I talked for too long, but we can get into like more of a conversation if you think.
Sure. I mean, I think we did. We sort of conducted it more as a conversation. We talked throughout, so I sort of appreciate everything that you said and the kind of going back and forth. I think I had questions, or before I didn't know what exactly you were going to talk about, so I had questions about this question of childhood, and which I think you answered. I guess I want to know more about your teaching and how that is affecting your practice as a filmmaker.
Right.
And if you just also more practically, what is it focused on, and how does that come into play? in your practice now? And one more thing, I guess I'll ask my questions all at once, and then you can answer them together, is sort of future directions that your work is taking. You didn't talk as much about your full feature, but I also encourage everyone to go. I don't know if they can find it, but I think I have, and I have watched it in the past. But your future direction of your work.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, about teaching. So I started teaching so I finished my feature in 2017. And then after 2017, I started teaching in School of the Art Institute of Chicago from 2017. And I was teaching part-time at the time. And then I started becoming like a full-time teacher from 2018, University of Iowa. And I was hired here mainly to be in the cinematic arts film video production program that we have here. So it's a production program, but also there's a focus on screenwriting in my teaching. And we just started a screenwriting major last year. So I've been active a lot in forming that program and in helping the program to be initiated and to start. And I've been teaching screenwriting courses for most of the semesters, which has been very good for me to go back to reading a lot of the early textbooks that I had read on screenwriting, especially my undergrad was focused on screenwriting, and to teach screenwriting, reading a lot of stories. Sometimes it's like really hard to have. Sometimes I had 2 classes of like each had 18 or 20 students, and so I'm following like 40 stories at the time, and it becomes so frustrating and confusing. But at the same time, I have a good memory for those stories and I still remember them. And like just to read people's stories is such a moving experience, not necessarily professional writers, but just to see when someone wants to start writing what they would write about. And most of the times it's not autobiographical, but there are some, like, you feel so much personal pain in them, that sometimes really hard to read through them. But anyway, like, that's been, I think, more than my professional growth, for my human growth, like for my growth as like a human being, has been really good to be less selfish. Learn that as an artist, I've become really like spoiled and narcissistically selfish in many ways, that like it's all about me and my projects. And now as a teacher, more than anything, it's, I think, a good humbling experience that, no, I'm giving my time and my attention and everything to what this other person has to say, who's just beginning to learn. And like, it's been very good for me to not be all centered around myself. It's been good for sanity and for for being able to give myself to others. So I like the service part of it, even though it's not easy, because I am expected to remain an artist, write my own work, do my own work. So it's like anyone who starts to teach, it's like that hard balance, because sometimes I think I try too much to be a good teacher, and I give myself so much to these classes, and I get so absorbed in them and so exhausted by like going through all these scripts and provide all this feedback, and then I cannot do my own work. So this is my 3rd year of full-time teaching as an assistant professor, and I think I ask around, like, people have a difficult time, at least for first year or first 2 years, to find their pace and like their place basically in academia. So for me, it's been like that like, I've got a lot. I think I've been exposed to so many new stories, to giving, like, to be at the service of other people. All of these are good, but I'm trying to find that balance. So I think it's good to be like, a lot of my production classes are more workshop style, and actually I'm using a lot of things I learned at Kiarostami's workshop, in terms of being more hands-on, being more about go out, make it, bring to class, let's talk about nitty-gritty of like editing, of sound, of this and that. And that has helped me to feel myself more confident with the craft of filmmaking, for sure. So those are the good parts of it. And the other thing is, I'm in Iowa City, and the Iowa City itself is a small town. Like, I was in Chicago before, and I love Chicago. Even though Chicago felt not as noisy and as crowded as the city behind you, which is where I come from. Tehran. Like when I was in Chicago, I was like, what's the deal? Why does it sound like a dead city after 10 p.m. in Tehran? We just start after 10. Like I remember memories of Tehran, in downtown of Tehran, being in a cafe at like 1 a.m. and it would be very normal, you know. Maybe 1 a.m. is an exaggeration, although I don't think it is. I think we would stay in cafes until very late, and you know, like there were some unsafe areas in Tehran, obviously, but in general, there was so much life outside, and it was more like New York City in that sense, but even crazier, right? But so anyway, like from Chicago, I got used to Chicago and I liked Chicago, and now to Iowa City, like being a city girl, it was really hard to get used to here. But it has its own advantages. It's simpler, smaller. But I think more than anything, like whenever I got a chance, we with my partner who's here, we drive outside of the city and we go to like all the rural areas. And Iowa is not flat. It's actually very hilly in a lot of parts, and there's beautiful landscape around here. And just to get to, you know, like these parts of America that I haven't been to, that like there's the more real like farming life going on, and be able to see that. And a lot of it is also reminding me of Kiarostami's love of the roads and road trips. So those have been really great. Best parts of being in Iowa, kind of. Yeah.
I love that you also sort of broke this US Iran into smaller parts. Of the difference between Chicago and Iowa City is vast as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I assume your students also come from everywhere.
Yes, in undergrad, it is not super diverse because a lot of people are from Iowa who come to University of Iowa. So it's not everywhere like international students. In undergrad is less, but in grad program, we try to have like also international students, although there have been difficulties, especially this year, with having international students coming, be able to come, but hopefully from next year will be easier. Yeah.
Yes. Well, okay, I think that's a good place to conclude. I think this went by really quickly. It does not seem that it was been very long, but I think I have kept you for a long time. So I think thank you so much. And I hope that we could be together in person for such conversations in future. Perhaps you can come to Princeton if you know, hopefully at some point where in-person events become possible.
I would love to. Yeah, definitely. And I didn't answer to your question about future direction, but
yeah,
I can
let's do that.
very simply say, I forgot that. I very simply say I'm writing at the moment. I'm hoping, you know, I don't want to rush into making another film. I know very well now what it takes to make a feature. So I want to go for the next project when I'm ready. But meanwhile, I'm working on screenplays, some short videos. I'm writing plays now. I always loved plays. So I think especially being here is good for my writing. So I try to do that, and yeah, work on smaller projects until like I see when I will be making my next film.
All right. Thank you so much, Anahita.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Of course.